Good morning. Today is July 9th. This is the LaRouche Organization Morning Update, and we could not be in a more divided situation. In fact, people may recall the words of Abraham Lincoln, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He gave a speech on that theme, actually, when he was running for U.S. Senate in the 1850s. And his point was that in the wake of the Dred Scott decision, which said that a slave was still property, even in a state where slavery was no longer legal, where slavery had been abolished, he said, that doesn't work because you're claiming that you're harming the rights of the slave owners if that person has their freedom, but you realize then you are saying that the states without slavery do not have the freedom to actually be without slavery. And he made the point that it's either going to be all one way or all the other. And of course, given that slavery violates every principle of natural law and human dignity, Lincoln was very clear that that slavery ultimately would have to be abolished, as Alexander Hamilton, Ben Franklin, and so many of our founding fathers intended. Well, now the world is in such a situation where you have the bankrupt transatlantic system, as we saw at the NATO conference, where they couldn't even issue a lengthy communique because President Trump no longer is interested in having a war with Russia, or I guess if there's going to be a war with Russia, he wants the Europeans to pay for it. It's all complete insanity. Germany is talking about spending 25 billion euros on new tanks to prepare for war with Russia, as if World War II never happened, as if there never was an Adolf Hitler. They have no memory of that. And meanwhile, the price of energy is going through the roof in Germany, plus all of their Mittelstand, all the medium-sized machine shops are closing down. I don't know how they're going to build the tanks. In the United States, similarly, we have now over 100 dead from the flooding in Texas. We have not been building basic water management infrastructure, but nonetheless, we have $1 trillion defense budget. For what? No one is attacking us. No one is going to attack us. We're not being invaded by Iran or Ukraine or Russia or anyone else. Why do we have to spend all this money to kill people? Now, and then you had Bibi Netanyahu, clearly who has President Trump's profile, so he's fawning all over him and saying how he's written to the Nobel Prize Committee and nominated Donald Trump, who just violated international law by bombing Iran and by funding and countenancing a genocide, that he's nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Why? Because the two of them, it sounds, are working on a plan to expel hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza. This is no kind of a peace plan. You must have self-determination for the Palestinian people, a two-state solution, which requires recognizing a Palestinian state along the 67 borders, or a land area equivalent to that, but including the Gaza Strip. And maybe you have to make some adjustments because the Israeli settlers have taken so much of the West Bank, but the key is water, the key is development. At any rate, so the bankruptcy, the cynicism, the bullying, arrogant nature of the West is exposed. On the other hand, over July 6th and 7th, you had the BRICS conference meeting in Brazil, and I wanted to share with you some of the incredible breakthroughs coming out of that conference, which are in no way a threat to us, but which the United States really should be joining. Number one, perhaps the very biggest, is that the transoceanic, bioceanic railroad from Brazil, the port of Ilhéus, on the Atlantic, to the Shanghai port in Peru, which was just completed with China. The railroad is now going to begin. A memorandum of understanding was signed between Brazil and China. They're going to begin all of the studies. This is a 2,500-mile railroad, which is going to transform international trade. The United States could take advantage of that if we were in a mind to do that. That's up to us. So that's perhaps the biggest concrete specific breakthrough, but otherwise, just to give you a sense of what is being discussed there. And bear in mind, these nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Egypt, the nations that are now part of this expanding BRICS process, are not doing it to be against anyone else, but because they say we need a new system which is more equitable. The foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, said that what we have to do is strengthen the multilateral world order, financial and economic issues, artificial intelligence, etc. He said that to address imbalances and to mobilize resources for development, Russia has introduced an initiative to create within BRICS a new investment platform with the participation of the BRICS Development Bank. And he thanked Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, who's now the head of the BRICS Development Bank, for her help in this. He said, multipolarity is not a choice, but rather an objective reality which succeeds the outdated neoliberal model that actually builds on neo-colonial practices. He explained that the global trade and finance system is fragmenting, exacerbated as a result of illegitimate unilateral sanctions and the use of the dollar as a means of punishment. He said the trust in the American currency as a formerly reliable payment instrument has therefore been undermined. In other words, they aren't going out of the dollar because they want to trash the dollar. They're saying, we can't trust you. Countries which put their money in the New York Federal Reserve Bank are liable to have their funds seized at any moment on the whim of the private bankers running that institution or the U.S. State Department. They're saying we can't work that way. We owe it to our people to be able to plan 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead, 50 years ahead. We need stable currencies. Therefore, we're going to use our own national currencies. They're not creating a new currency. They're just trying to create a situation where they don't have to be penalized by the fools in the United States and particularly Britain. He said the U.S. has seen a record level of sovereign debt of more than $37 trillion, and it continues to grow. And the situation in the less developed countries is out of control. We're paying so much on debt service. He said, therefore, it is not surprising that the global majority is interested in creating development mechanisms independent from the West, independent from the sinkhole. Then the Chinese premier, Li Qiang, spoke, and he said that while flames of war continue to rage in some regions, international rules and order face serious challenges, and the authority and efficacy of multilateral mechanisms are weakening. One must, quote, firmly safeguard the shared interests of the international community and always stand on the right side of history. He said we should uphold justice and safeguard a world of peace and tranquility. Achieving fairness and justice is a persistent pursuit of BRICS countries, an important theme of BRICS cooperation. When international rules are being undermined and bullying practices are on the rise, we need to stand up for what is right and speak up for justice. We need to act as a positive and stable force for good in the world. Gee, isn't that threatening? They want to act as a positive, stable force for good in the world. Of course, Trump is proposing 10% tariffs on anybody who works with this system. It's really crazy. Second, he said, we should focus on development and bolster the driving forces of economic growth. China's journey of reform and opening up shows that in solving all problems, development is the foundation and key. Very much like what Helga Zepp-LaRouche has said about the question of development to eradicate poverty and eliminate the causes for war. Li Qiang further announced that China will establish the China BRICS New Quality Productive Forces Research Center and the BRICS New Industry Golden Egret Excellence Scholarships, which will help BRICS countries train talents in areas such as industry, telecommunication, and pursue innovation-driven development. They want to create qualified, skilled workers in every nation on the planet. He announced that China, he said, quote, with rich histories and cultures, BRICS countries should be advocates of harmonious coexistence of civilizations. We need to call for respect for cultural diversity in the world and work to ensure that different civilizations inspire each other and prosper together. So the optimism is palpable. These nations have been through hard times, but they are working together to build modern high-speed rail, deep water ports, and they also put forward a health initiative, a global leadership policy for eliminating diseases of poverty and inequality. And of course, what would you expect? The priority is sanitation, nutrition, housing, that this is how you stop the spread of disease. Now compare that to the situation in the United States, where I believe in New York City alone, we have something like 130,000 people living in the shelter system. That's way up because of the influx of migrants, which was created by insane policies of looting poor nations, and also the Biden administration policy of inviting everyone in. This can all be solved in the domain of economic development, in the realm of the actual American system of physical economy. Our nation should be promoting this, not trying to attack it. And to that end, again, I hope people have seen this. The LaRouche organization has produced a beautiful new pamphlet, Economic Recovery Plan 2025, in the spirit of 1776. You can see it's got Ben Franklin on the cover. You can find it at thelarouche.org. It's on our website in PDF form, or we will send you copies to distribute. So have a wonderful day. We must shift the United States to represent the tradition of Alexander Hamilton, Ben Franklin, John Quincy Adams, and Lyndon LaRouche, and I think that we can